Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most legendary royal lines in ancient lore, the Suryavansh, the Solar Dynasty. This is the incredible story of the kings who ruled before Lord Ram, in a lineage said to be descended from the sun itself.
It's a pretty big question, right? When you think about a dynasty that lasts for ages and produces these larger-than-life heroes, you just have to wonder, what's the origin story? I mean, where does all that greatness even come from?
And for these kings, the answer is, well, it's nothing short of cosmic. Their story doesn't kick off with a battle or some big conquest. Nope. It begins with the literal source of light and life for our entire solar system. So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the dynasty's divine beginnings, then meet its first kings. After that, we'll get into some of the most amazing legends, see how the dynasty got a new name, and finally, we'll arrive at its most famous descendant, Lord Ram.
Okay, first things first. To really get the Suryavansh, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. And I don't mean on Earth, I mean in the heavens. We've got to look at the celestial origins that gave this dynasty its name. The lineage is actually pretty direct. It all starts with Surya Dev, the sun god. His son was Vaivasvata Manu, who is considered the ancestor of all humanity in this particular age. And then it was Manu's son, Ikshvaku, who brought that divine heritage right down to earth, founding the kingdom of Ayodhya and becoming its very first king.
So, you've got this divine foundation. But how do you build on that? A dynasty isn't just about a powerful start, right? It's really about the rulers who come next, the ones who establish the values that are going to echo down through the generations.
So, in those early days, a few kings really left their mark. After Ikshvaku, there was a descendant named Kukutsha who was so famous that the lineage was sometimes called the Kukutsha dynasty in his honor. But maybe one of the most famous of all the early kings was Harishchandra, a man whose entire identity became tied to one single, powerful virtue. And that virtue was truth. King Harishchandra's whole legend is defined by his absolute, unbreakable promise to his word, no matter what it cost him personally. It wasn't just, a good policy. It was who he was. It set a standard for integrity that became the benchmark for all the kings who came after him. As the dynasty went on, the scale of what its kings were doing just got bigger and bigger. We're now getting into a period where these rulers performed feats that were so epic, they sound like myths, and they literally shaped the culture and even the geography of the land. 60,000. Yeah, just look at that number for a second. Let it sink in. It's not a budget or the population of a town. In the story of the Suryavanshali, it's the number of sons a single king had. And that king was Sagara. His story is just on an entirely different level. Not only was he the father to this massive family, but the lore also says he took on the incredible task of digging out the oceans. That's why in Sanskrit, the oceans are still called Sagara, in his honor.
Now, as unbelievable as Sagara's story is, the dynasty was actually destined for something even bigger. Generations later, one of his descendants would go on a divine mission to bring a celestial river down from the heavens to earth. That man was Bhagirath. His name is basically synonymous with one of the greatest achievements you can imagine. Through unbelievable penance and sheer will, he is the one credited with bringing the sacred river Ganga down to earth, forever linking his dynasty with one of the most holy rivers in the world. So the dynasty was already known as the Suryavansh and sometimes the Kukutsha dynasty. But one king's reign was so perfect, so balanced in power, justice, and prosperity that he gave the lineage the name it's most famous for. And this was King Raghu. He basically set a new gold standard. His time as king was seen as a golden age, famous for fair laws, big military victories, and incredible generosity. His name became so connected with excellence that the dynasty just adopted it. From that point on, being part of the Suryavansh also meant you were part of the Raghuvansh, the great dynasty of Raghu. And that brings us to the absolute peak of this epic family tree. All these stories of truth and power and devotion, they all lead us to the one king,
who is seen as the embodiment of everything the dynasty stood for, its most revered figure. The final steps to that peak start with the great king Dasharath, himself a descendant of Raghu. He was the father of 4 noble sons, but it was his eldest, Ram, who wouldn't just rule. He would become a moral and spiritual ideal for millions.
Rama was known as Maryada Purushottam, and this title, it's everything. It means the perfect man, the ultimate person who lives his life by dharma, by righteousness above all else. He is the complete fulfillment of all those virtues that kings like Harishchandra established so long ago.
But the story doesn't just end with Ram. His legacy continued on through his sons, Love and Kush. And just like their ancestor Ikshvaku, they weren't just heirs to a throne. They became founders in their own right, establishing new cities and making sure that the great Solar Dynasty kept on shining. So you go from the sun to a king, from a king to a legend, and from a legend to an ideal. The Suryavanshas is so much more than a list of names. It's a story about how each generation can build on the last. And it leaves us with a question, doesn't it? When a family line is said to come from the sun itself, is its biggest challenge living up to that divine light? Or is it the very human struggle to embody ideals like truth and righteousness, generation after generation?